Okay, good evening, everybody. It's evening in Sydney, but good morning to people, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I must say it's been quite amazing for me, and I have to say this, I'm very gratified that people all over the world are listening and have been in touch, and it really reinforces how we are Am Echad and we're all connected, and I really appreciate you all connecting with me and staying in touch. I'm going to be talking about worry, and it's an interesting word. And one of the reasons I decided to talk about it now is because a lot of people that I talk to or that I work with are coming to me now and going, well, now I've got something to worry about. Now you can't tell me not to be anxious about nothing. And it reminds me a bit about the joke, about the hypochondriac who dies and puts on their plaque, you see, I really was sick. So why I'm saying that is because I work with a population that is sometimes called the worried well. And when people use that term, it often has a little bit of a derogatory tongue, like they don't really sick and they don't really have mental health issues. It's a bit of also, I'm not working with a real population, but it is a bit about the kind of people who are worried, but they're really well. And that's not really a good way of seeing it, because people who are worried can't sleep at night, can't eat, actually have very unhappy lives. Whatever's going on in their real life, they can still feel very, very unhappy because their mind is taken up with their worries. So even though an outsider might say they're the worried well, it doesn't take away from the distress that people who are worried feel. And also, if you are a warrior, O-R-R-I-E-R, if you're a warrior, not a warrior, then you can set off anxiety, which is why I really want to stress it's so important to work on not being a warrior, because you actually are damaging yourself in many ways and can actually create anxiety. Because when you keep having negative thoughts, and especially over and over, you're thinking about how bad you feel, or how horrible the world is, or what's going to happen tomorrow, that kind of worrying and catastrophizing can lead to anxiety. I'm sorry, my throat's a bit croaky. I don't know why. I'm absolutely fine. It just started now. So there's a difference between worry and concern. So not only do people say to me, worrying's not so bad, we're not saying you shouldn't be concerned. And a little bit later, I'll go through what it means to be concerned. But worry is something where you go over and over in your mind about either something you should have done better in the past or something that might or might not happen in the future. And our sages actually say that when a person is worried, they destroy their lives. You don't have a present. So if you're a person who, let's say, is always worried about the future, today, you're destroying today because you're worried about the future. And then when you get into tomorrow, which is the present now, you're worried about the future. So you never have a present, and you are destroying your life for yourself. Worry is very, very destructive. And ultimately, as I said, you can wire your brain that it becomes a habit. It can actually become very entrenched, that you no longer know how to think with a clear mind. And as I said, it can affect you physically, emotionally, it can affect your relationships. It's very, very difficult to live with yourself when you worry too much. So we want to differentiate between worry and concern. And I want to make it absolutely clear that worry is not helpful. It's not good. It's not something to aim to be. You don't want to be a worried person. But I also want to say that if you do worry a lot, it doesn't mean, you're just the worried well, and what are you going to a psychologist for? You don't need it. No, it can be very, very distressing. So one of the things that we need to know is that true freedom is when you have peace of mind, when you're choosing what thoughts you want to have, and when you're able to choose to have peaceful thoughts. Now, when we fight for freedom, if you think about people over the generations who fought wars for freedom, our sages say that's what we should be doing. We need to fight to have freedom of our thoughts. We shouldn't just go, oh, it's too hard, or I don't want to do it. Everything I'm saying to you today, I hope you'll take on board, that you'll put in the energy to have freedom, to have peace of mind, and not let your worries destroy your life and destroy your peace of mind and your inner happiness and your world. Now, one of the things I've also discovered about worry, because I do mix a lot with the worried well, although I never call them that, is that some of you might be sitting there going, I can't let go of being worried. And you might not know why. You might feel quite anxious about letting go. But there's a lot of secondary gain in being worried. Now, what I mean by secondary gain is that it's serving a purpose. Now, often when something happens to us and we don't choose that thing, but then there's a secondary gain. So, for example, when a person worries, it often makes them feel better about themselves. So I'll give you the classic example that I see over and over again. I see mothers who feel they have to show that they're worried about their children 24/7 because that means they're a good mother. So the classic I see is people come to my office, we're talking about 50 minutes of their time, and they will put their phone down in front of them on the arm of the chair or the table, and they'll go, I'm sorry, I have to leave it on in case the school phones. Are the children well? Yes. Do they go to a good school? Yes. Do you trust the school to look after your kids? Yes. So for 50 minutes, you can't have a session that's about you. But what I've realized is a lot of mothers, they think they're proving they're good mothers, and it's to themselves. If I show that I'm on the alert all the time, that means I'm a good mother. And I'll give you an example. I'm not actually being derisive because I had this experience myself. When my children were teenagers and they started to drive, different mothers had different reactions. And my reaction was I would go to sleep at night. My kids knew how to drive. My normal bedtime, I would go to sleep. But my friends, some of them would tell me, oh, now your children are driving. How do you sleep at night? And I go, very well. Aren't you up all night worrying? And I'd go, no, I'm not. If God forbid something would happen, I always say when the policeman knocks on the door, then I'll start to worry. But all my kids drove. They all drove at all different hours. They drove all over the world. It didn't worry me. But what I realized, I sometimes thought, is there something wrong with me? Maybe I'm not a good mother. Maybe I should sit up all night waiting every night for 10 years for each child in case something happens. So even I had that feeling of maybe I'm a reckless mother because I'm not staying up all night while my 20-year-old is driving. So we have these thoughts that we live in a culture where being worried proves something about ourselves. I just want to digress because this isn't exactly the same, but it's the same. There's been a lot of research now where being busy is a status symbol. You can look it up. It's become a whole, where people today cannot say they're not busy. The secondary gain of being very busy is you can tell everybody how busy you are. It's a status symbol. You know, how many people did you have your Shabbos table pre-COVID? I realized. How many lift schemes do you do? You know, how many hours are you working? How many projects are you? It's a thing. It's become a status symbol. And I don't think worry is a status symbol, but it has something of that it proves something about me if I'm a worried mother, if I'm a worried spouse, if I'm a worried daughter, then it shows I'm really loving. And if I was actually relaxed about any of these roles, then maybe I'm a bad person. So I want you to be aware, because if you are getting secondary gain, then no matter what I'm going to say tonight, you're not going to change because you need it to feel better about yourself. And what I recommend if you do discover this about yourself is, first of all, speak to someone you trust about, are your worries legitimate? You know, should you be concerned? And if they're not, and not everybody is being worried in that way, then you need help to let go of it because it can become an obsession. So worry is thinking around and around in circles. And if it becomes excessive, that's actually what an obsessive thought is over and over. So I'll give you an example of an obsession. Now we have apps that track plane routes. Again, so you'll have mothers of children of all ages who will catch a plane from Sydney, Australia, and they're going to Israel. It's a very long flight. All day, every opportunity, out comes the app. Where is the plane now? Oh, it's going over Darwin. Oh, it's just crossing Indonesia. Oh, it's near South Korea. So this person is on the plane. You've trusted them to go overseas on their own. If they're with a group, they're with a group. But mothers and some fathers have it on their phone and they keep wanting to know where the plane is. Now that becomes an obsession. They're not able to get on with their day because every step of the way they know, oh, we're over Darwin now. You can't be in the present when you're thinking about that. So these kind of apps, they have a place, but as we'll talk in a minute, if you cannot control anything, it's just a waste of your brain power to know the plane's now over Darwin and 10 minutes later it's over north of Darwin and then a little bit. It's just obsessive thinking that is destroying your life. So that you would ask somebody and someone you trust, is there real concern or is it about me feeling really, a good mother? Another example I'll give you, because I run a lot of women's groups, I hear this. I was running a women's group and their oldest child went for the first time to Israel on IST. And she had a son. And what was happening was there was a WhatsApp group with all the kids and their parents. I don't know how many were on the group, but a lot. And she said all the girls were taking photos and showing their mothers what they were eating for breakfast. Photo, oh, we're having pancakes. And again, her son didn't, every 3 days he touched base with her. So she also started to feel, a bit competitive, a bit worried. Was there something wrong in the relationship? Because these mothers, their daughters were overseas, but the daughters didn't even eat a meal without the mothers worrying that they're okay and what are they doing and being, I'm not even talking about the over-involved part, but it's the, I've got to know, is she eating lunch? Is she eating well? Is she, oh, that's too many pancakes. That is not healthy. So if you have any secondary gain that your worry is giving you, you need to really think about it because then you need to work on your self-esteem so that you can let go of it. Another secondary gain I've seen a lot is this idea that I'm not stupid. So if everybody's worried about something that you can do nothing about and you go, well, I'm not going to worry about it, let's say like COVID, and you go, I'm going to leave that up to the experts, then sometimes you worry, I'm going to be seen as stupid. Other mothers are Googling and they're arguing with the experts and fathers are doing this and other people are going, I trust the experts. Well, if I don't worry what the experts are doing, then maybe I'll seem stupid. Another one is sometimes people feel I've got nothing to live for. If I'm not worrying about my children or my job or my husband or whatever, then what else have I got? So if I'm busy with this, it shows my life is full. If you like this busyness, I'm so full. I've got so many thoughts to worry about. And another one is sometimes it's an excuse for not accomplishing. So you have this a little bit with perfectionists. They would rather not do it if they can't get it perfectly. They're worried it's not going to be good enough, but it's actually an excuse. And this is a Torah idea. I didn't write down the name of the rabbi, but he says it comes actually from laziness. You don't really want to do it, and so you say, well, I'm worried. Or you ask someone to do something, and I'm worried I'm not going to be able to do it. So sometimes we use worry as an excuse so that we don't have to be accountable. So there are lots and lots of different secondary gain that worry will be doing for you, if that's the case. And I want you to really dig deep and think about what it is, why it's keeping you worrying, because unless you solve that, as I say, nothing that I'm going to say is going to make any difference because you need to hold on. You need to use it for something and it's serving a purpose. Now, when you worry, not only is it not concern and it's not helpful, it actually prevents good problem solving. So if I were to imagine that your brain, there's a center part, let's say the brain stem and the primitive brain, and over it, imagine there's a soft cushion, which is your neocortex, that does all the problem solving and whatever. Now, if the center brain is what's functioning and it's hijacking the rest of the brain, the majority of your brain can't actually function that well. And why I'm giving you this image is because you've got so much brain that can be doing so many interesting things that you are preventing by focusing on the worry. It's like, although your brain isn't a muscle, there's so many parts that you could be exercising and using and growing, and it's exciting to develop your brain. But instead, you're focusing on that primitive brain, oi, 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 what if, and you're not able to use the rest. So you want to think about, it's like only, strengthening your biceps and not really resting the rest of your body. You need your whole body to be functioning and well and healthy, and you want your whole brain to be functioning and well and healthy. Now, what does it mean to be concerned? This is a time where we need to be concerned. I'm certainly, and who am I standing here saying, don't worry about COVID. Be concerned. And what does it mean to be concerned? To use your brain to actually find out what you need to do, go to authoritative websites, learn what safety behaviors they are, do whatever you need to do to stay safe. That's not worry, that's being concerned. If you've got a big decision to make, you need to take time to problem solve and plan it. This doesn't mean that, as I said, that one's stupid. You do what you need to do, but then you stop. It's not going around and around. So if you worry that you're going to get COVID, you find out how you've got to wash your hands, how far you've got to stand away from other people, what the rules in your state or town or suburb are, and you stick to them. And that's all. And then you free up the rest of your brain to be used in other ways. Because once you've done that, there's nothing more that you can do. And this is also one of the secondary gains, is we like to feel, we are created in God's image, and sometimes we like to feel that we can do more than we can. It's a false thing that if I learn enough, I'm in control. And a big part of being human is knowing not only are we not in control, but actually we're quite vulnerable. And this is a big thing that we've learned from COVID. Human beings, we think that we're so powerful. And then along came this virus that has completely turned the world upside down. Completely. And in ways that no one expected. So for example, we're now going through a second wave in Victoria, and they're coming out with more research about how this virus works, and it's different to previous viruses, and what it can do. It's all new. And the second wave, and is there going to be a third wave? There's all kinds of things we don't know. And we're really meant to get in touch with the fact that we're quite vulnerable. So we can say this is within our center of control. That's the Covey's expression. This is what I can do. But the rest, I have to leave. And in this forum, we talk about believing in God and having imuna, that God will take care of the rest, because it doesn't help for me to worry. What do I know? I'm not an immunologist. I'm not that's none of my field. So worrying about it all isn't going to do anything. We have to at some point hand over. And I want to just talk a little bit about this, because there's a fascinating book called The Lonely Man of Faith by Rabbi Soloveitchik. And I reread it, and I didn't touch on it last time when I spoke about loneliness, and now's my opportunity. Because it's really interesting. He talks about Adam and Eve, and he talks about when it's described in Bereshit, Adam is described twice. The first time he's described as being created with his partner, with Eve. Man and woman were created together. And he's told to go out and subdue the world, to own the world and to run the world. He's in a way the master of the world. The second time Adam's spoken about, he's alone. And he names all the animals, and then he says to Hashem, I'm lonely. He feels his loneliness, and he turns to Hashem. And then Hashem puts him to sleep and gives him an operation. He has to suffer in a way for Eve to be created. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says these are the paradigms of two parts of us. The one part is the part of us that is so potent, the part of us that can subdue the world, that knows science and medicine. When I say us individually and as a group, look at us. We were just sending people up to Mars. We were just sending people on a private flight to the moon. You know, it'll be like Qantas soon, just pop over to the moon. It's all become so easy. We are just powerful. Adam, the first Adam, can just subdue the world. And when we do that, we feel very, very powerful. But what we lack, he says, is what's called redemption. It's about redeeming ourselves. And the only way we do that is Adam the second. That we actually have to suffer. We actually are put into a deep sleep. And the things that change us come through hardship. And so he gets Chava through that surgery, if you like. He gets his other partner, and she helps him to a large degree with his existential crisis. And we have those two parts. We have that powerful part where we know we can conquer the world. And then we have another part that is defeated. But in that defeat, it's when we know Hashem. It's when we know we can't do it. And we know nobody actually can help us. No one can take us through it except Hashem. And so this is the thing, when we worry, we're in Adam number one. We think if we just worry enough and talk about it enough and research enough, even though we know nothing about it, pass comments on it as if we're experts, that's Adam number one. Look at us, we control the world. But really, Adam number two is the one that helps us have an intimate relationship with Hashem. And as he says, it's redemptive in the sense that we redeem our soul, we redeem a whole other side of ourselves that is necessary to have a fulfilled life. Now, this is what this coronavirus has given us. It's all a gift. At the moment, it doesn't feel like a gift. But one of the gifts that we can already see is we can get in touch with our Adam number two, the part that needs Hashem, and that knows we don't have all the answers. We can ask Hashem. We can say, I'm lonely. We can say, please help us. And then we hand over. But we're still in the Garden of Eden. We still need to enjoy the world, even when we're going through hard times, and know that Hashem is good. That's where our focus must be, not on worrying, because worrying is an illusion that we're doing something, but really what we're doing is destroying our lives. So it's a beautiful idea that we need to go through these hardships to connect to Hashem. But again, it doesn't mean we don't plan. There's a point at which we can function. There's a point at which we do. And then there's a point at which we hand over and we say, we can't do anymore. At the end of the day, we are humans. We come from dust and we need Hashem to help us. Now, one of the things that worry tells us, and none of this is a criticism, you know, I always talk to myself as much as everybody, is that our emunah is not as strong as it's meant to be. And one of the ways of strengthening our emunah and our bitochen is to know, is to learn Torah, is to keep our mind on the spiritual, is to continually, as I always say, look above the sun, connect to Hashem, rather than worry about human things below the sun. And we know that we live by the times, and there's been like really interesting parashas whenever I've given my shiurim, and this week it was all about the journeys. And one of the, I'm just going to pick it up. I read this beautiful thing. It's from the Rebbe's, one of his sichos. And yesterday's parsha was Mates Maseh. And what they're basically saying is, you know, it's the journeys. It's a journey. There are 42 journeys where they left Egypt, Mitzrayim, and they were going to Israel. And what it means is that life is a journey. We cannot expect not to go through journeys. Life is a very difficult journey to journey to journey. And what we do is we go through times of constriction. That's what Mitzrayim stands for, narrowness. And then we expand and we move to the next level. And then there's constriction and growth and constriction and growth. And the idea is that if we go in with realism, that it's normal to be going through things. Unfortunately, it's normal to go for pandemics. As I said, they've been before, even if it's only 100 years. Trials and tribulations are part of life. But the idea is you have a realization that it's part of living. So the Rebbe explained, I just want to read this, that a person's life is a series of journeys. Each one is a straight in comparison to the one after it. So he talks about young children. So 5-year-olds crying about something, a toy breaking, and the 10-year-old goes, don't be so silly. But the 10-year-old's crying about their scooter's broken, and the 15-year-old is going, well, it's not as bad as, and we look and we go, scooter, none of them is important because we've all moved on. But each one at each straight, are going through our own journeys and our own difficulties. So there are different levels. And we go on it until the day that we die. And the Israel, when we go from Mitzrayim to Israel, stands for the world to come. So the perspective is we are going to go through journeys, we are going to go through difficulties. Worrying isn't going to help you with them. Preparing is going to help you. So what does preparation mean? Preparation means that we spend our time growing spiritually, but also psychologically. We need to develop resilience. And resilience means the ability to cope. If we can cope with today, then we can believe that we can cope with tomorrow. So what skills do I need today that will help me for tomorrow? And the skills are always the same. One of the skills is focus on spiritual matters, not material matters. Secondly, build your strengths. So things like asking for help, working on yourself, realizing where you need growth and working on that. So if you have an anger problem and something brings it out for you, then you need to work on your anger problem. You need to work on the fact that you can cope with today. And whatever you need to cope with today is going to help you for tomorrow. That's a big difference between someone who's anxious or a warrior and someone who isn't. Someone who isn't doesn't believe, oh, nothing's going to go wrong, life is wonderful. They know life is full of troubles, but they believe in themselves. They believe that whatever Hashem sends me, I will be able to cope. And part of coping is I will go for help. I will ask for help. I will pray to Hashem. I will do whatever I need to do. But if I've got through yesterday and I'm getting through today, why am I going to destroy today by worrying about tomorrow? Let me rather just work on myself so that when tomorrow comes with whatever it brings, my 42 journeys, I'm going to be okay. Now, that doesn't mean everything's going to be wonderful, but coping on a day-to-day basis is what gives you strength for the future. You don't have to worry too much about the future. Now, the Chofetz Chaim is actually the word that came to my mind now is brutal. He says a lot of people worry, for example, about finances. They worry, and in his language, they won't have with what to live. And he says, but what they're not worrying about is, do they have with what to die? So I'm going to bring this up because a lot of worry is about, are we going to die? And when are we going to die? And are the people around us going to die? And that's a legitimate worry. From the Chofetz Chaim point of view and the Jewish point of view, there's no worry. You are going to die. I'm going to die. So there's no what ifs. We are. We just don't know when. And so the idea is to prepare for death. How can you prepare to have a holy death? Now, I know it sounds confronting, and some of you might be going, oh my gosh. But when I read it, I thought this is what the latest book on death anxiety is saying, but without the Jewish or spiritual side. People need to prepare for death. Instead of going, every day I wake up worrying my parents are going to die, they are going to die. So prepare for it. Prepare in the best way you can, whether it's making sure their wills are in order, spending as much time with them, taking them to the right doctors, but they are. It's not going to be a shock. We hope it'll be at 120, but we don't know, which brings us back to we only have today. So there's no shock or surprise, but preparing for death means being more spiritual, but it also means, and I've read some books on this, of how, when I read it, I was quite like, remember reading of certain rabbis or rebbitzins who climbed onto their beds, they said goodbye to everyone, they had a sip of water, and they died peacefully. And I thought, wow, that is something to think about. You know, to actually think I am going to die. And when that happens, if I'm able to, how do I want to die? But that's the difference between worrying and planning. And yes, it may sound brutal, but actually it's a fact. And we need to prepare for death. And we need to know that everyone's died before us. It's a natural life process. And stop worrying about it, but actually using our time wisely instead. So what else can we do to alleviate worry? Wish I could read my writing. The one thing is to think about other things, to be aware when worry takes over and you can't think about anything else. You need to have, as I say, all different parts of your brain working. So you need to exercise the motor part. You need to do enough exercise and movement. Very important. You need to do interesting puzzles and things. We know that as you age, it helps, but in general, it's good. Do fun things. Having a laugh every day is very important. Laughter is the best medicine. So when you feel a bit down or you start to worry, go onto YouTube, find a clean-cut comedian with the humor that you like. Watch 5 minutes. You'll laugh, you change your biochemistry, you'll move on. Read interesting books. Talk to other people. And spend your life caring about other people. If you want to worry, Rav Salanter says, worry about other people. When you start worrying about yourself, look around. Are you in a warm home? Have you got what you need? Most of the time, most of us have what we need. Why don't you, rather than think about your next door neighbor, worry about somebody else? It's a very good exercise. If you want to worry, find someone else. Have they got enough food? Have they got what they need? What can I do to help them? Take the focus off you and then translate it into physical mitzvot. Do for other people. The more you do for other people and take the focus off yourself, the less you will worry. So again, you need some time to have concerns. And generally, what the Tanya says, Viktor Frankl says this, it's a very well-known thing, is when you have a worry, what you need to do is set aside every day to worry. Now, the way Viktor Frankl does it, it's called paradoxical intention. So he found that people would keep worrying. So he would say, write down what you're worried about. And you tell yourself that at 8 o'clock at night is your worry hour. And then you sit down at 8 o'clock and you say to yourself, worry. And the paradoxical part is, on command, you won't be able to worry. So he did it as a therapeutic technique. But if you read the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says the same thing. He says, if a thought comes into your mind, or worry comes into your mind, it's really the Yetzer Hara. And instead of trying to push it away, because it'll just come back harder, you don't say, go away, or I'm not going to think about it, because the Yetzer Hara is a very wily old man. He'll come in all different ways and guises. You go, you know what? I've taken that on board. You're talking to yourself. No one knows this is going on in your head. I will think about it at 8 o'clock tonight. That's my worry time. And what happens is the Yetzer Hara is happy to wait because you've said, I've taken it on board. And then you sit down at 8 o'clock and you take it on board and you think, I had a thought that I am a bad person. Now that could be the Yetzer Hara, but maybe you did do actually something bad. So then you use that as a time to go, not to then worry, why, how. Okay, I'll make a commitment not to do that action anymore. I'm not globally a bad person, but I know why I felt that because I was rude to that person. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to apologize. From tomorrow, I'm going to be different. And then you let it go. You don't have to go over it again tomorrow. It's done. The Alter Rebbe says you have those feelings of guilt or whatever just to motivate you to change. It's a springboard to change. And then once you've made your commitment to change, you let go of it forever. So you can have worry times. You can have times where you really want to think about, you know, how's the flights going? Was my daughter in Israel eating well enough? Because you had the thought during the day, and then you either fix it or ignore it. At that point, it's a once-off thing. And you rather do an action to fix it or you need to let go of it. And a very common way of letting go of it, as I say, is to distract yourself with humor or action or a puzzle or something like that. The other big way of letting go of it is to talk to somebody else. So if you have a concern or something you can't let go of it, we are social beings. And the Torah tells us to talk to people. Now, you must talk to somebody that you trust. And you must talk to someone who can handle it. So if you are going to tell your worries to somebody who is then going to take on that worry and worry, the Jewish approach is rather don't tell them. If it's someone that needs to know, like a parent, the way you do it, you need to be careful, because the idea is not to, it's contagious, make everybody worried. Because again, worry is destructive. You need to find somebody who is going to be able to contain, who's going to be able to help you feel supported and to look at that worry and to manage the worry. So if you have someone in your life who gets very worked up and you're going to feel worse afterwards, don't do that. Sometimes we choose people like that because it validates our worry. We say, oh, you know, I'm worried about this. And they go, oh, me too. And then you go, you see, I'm valid. We're back to the secondary gate. Oh, good. It's not just me. Then there must be a reason. You don't want to go to somebody who is going to escalate your anxiety. You need to have a trusted advisor, a friend, a mashpir, a psychologist, a rabbi, somebody you trust that you can talk about your worries, but who contain it and who can help you with it. Not that it's going to get worse in any way. A really helpful thing, if it is something ongoing, like let's say, God forbid, you have a child who is ill or you have an illness, is to to be part of a social group where people are going through the same thing. And then again, it's not done as a worry. You go to the group in order to get the support, in order to find tools, in order to move on. That's one of the biggest reasons for these groups. So this is when I'm saying about being resilient. You know, when things go wrong, you need to find things that are going to help you to cope. And once you do that, you know that you will always cope. It's an interesting thing how groups have become just an everyday part of life. They weren't in the 70s. They started in the 70s. But I was reading a book, with Lee Sales' book, I think, and she was talking about a family where a stepson had murdered the father, which was her husband, and the sister, and this group, and the police who are managing the case, but also the family members. And it's such a shocking thing that people have lived through, but they go regularly to these groups and they get a lot of support because there are people there that understand and can identify and be with them. So it's a very normal thing. Now, when you read a book like that, and please God, nobody goes through these terrible traumas, but it does give you hope that people get through things, and we just have to learn how to do it. We don't want to worry if it's going to happen. No use. We look for evidence. So CBT says, when you say what if, you want to know, is there evidence? Because otherwise, our imaginations are so powerful that we can dream up the most incredible things. So what happens is, there is, let's say, a trigger. So a common trigger is your partner, husband, wife, child, we'll say this partner, doesn't answer their mobile and they're half an hour late from work. So I do this as one of my examples. I ask people, 9 times out of 10 people say he's died or been in an accident. 1 out of 10 say he's having an affair. But no one is okay with that. And again, in today's world, you know, if someone doesn't pick up their phone or answer straight away, there's something catastrophic that's happened. Now, the brain won't accept you going, it's nothing, he's definitely fine. That's why if people tell you when you're worrying, it doesn't make you feel better when people say, stop it, it's nothing. To you, it's something. But what the brain will accept, very similar to what I was saying about the Yetzer Hara, is being able to hold. So what you say is, why fear? It may not happen. It's my fear that he's dead. But until I have evidence, I don't know that anything has happened. So where is the evidence? When there's evidence, when the policeman comes knocking on the door, then I give myself permission to worry. So we look for evidence. So what anxiety or worry is, it's like a child who's scared of the dark and they're convinced there's a boogeyman in the cupboard, and you tell them there is no boogeyman. You're fine. You turn on the light, you open the cupboard, and the child goes, no, there's a boogeyman. That's what worry is. What if this is going to happen? What if that's going to happen? And as I say, our imaginations can dream up the most incredible things. At that point, we have a choice. The one tool is why fear. There's no evidence. It's just my imagination. So I can use my imagination to think of something else. I can think that maybe he stopped on the way to buy me a bunch of roses. Or maybe he's organizing a surprise party. All these things have happened to me, by the way. Once my husband didn't come home and I was so upset, and he was out buying a Mother's Day present with my daughter. So I learned that the hard way, or the good way, that there I was thinking the worst, and there he was out shopping. So you can think, you can choose a good thought or a bad thought. And there's a new book that's come out called The Positivity Bias. We tend to have a negativity bias, but we need to work on ourselves to have a positivity bias. There's no evidence either way. Which one are you going to choose? Rather dream up amazing things that are going to happen until there's evidence. Once there's evidence, then you have permission to be as worried as you like. Well, then you won't actually be worried. You'll either be planning a funeral or rushing to the hospital or doing something practical. But I really, really want you to take away that this worry is not only a waste of time, you are destroying your brain. It's getting more and more in this obsessive circuit that gets harder and harder to break. You're destroying your pleasure in everyday life, and it has no benefit. So I want you to think about times where you've been worried and nothing happened. In fact, sometimes good happened. And I want to give you 3 examples I wrote down of people that I know or work with, and you don't know who they are. I've definitely chosen people you wouldn't know. But just this week, these 3 things happened. Now, why I'm sharing it with you is these examples are what help me always to look at life with a bit of wisdom. I never say to people, don't worry, it'll be okay. But I know from history that actually, I'm making up the statistics, but 9 times out of 10, what we worry about doesn't happen. So case number 1, there's a woman who called me. I knew her years ago. And she called me one day in crisis. She had to have an urgent session. Why? Her husband hadn't been paying the mortgage payments and the house was being repossessed. So she woke up in the morning, the sheriff was there, they put locks on the door. You can imagine she was in crisis, and they had a week to get out. And the story was that they had borrowed 12 years ago money from a wealthy friend. The husband has ADHD. And if you know anyone with ADHD, they tend to be quite disorganized. For whatever reason, he wasn't paying. For 2 years, he didn't pay the mortgage. She didn't know, and the sheriff arrived at the door. So they had to move very quickly. And to her credit, I wanted to, like, at times go, you're not angry with your husband, but I don't want to stir. She wasn't. She accepted he's got ADHD. She actually was very good about it. And they moved into a rental. On Thursday, she comes to my office and she says, I've got such an exciting weekend coming up. There's an auction, we're buying a house. But I thought you lost everything. Well, she explains to me that what happened was they owed the guy who had the mortgage, who had the money, I don't know what the sum was, a certain sum of money. He then repossessed the house and he sold it. He took what was owed to him. He took all the lawyer's fees. But there was such a large sum of money left over because the house had appreciated that for the first time in her life, she's a woman in her 50s, they had enough money to nearly buy a whole, now they're both getting to retire, they're in their 50s, 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney. It would never have happened if this whole thing, now I'm not making this up, these are people that this happened to. And she just said it was unbelievable. She said she was going to the auction with this huge sum of money. They might have a very small mortgage, but for the first time in her life, she's going confidently to an auction because she's got this chunk of money. So what seemed so bad was really good. And I hear these kind of stories all the time. And that's why when I talk about the journeys and the 5-year-old and the 10-year-old and the 15-year-old, as we get older, we need that wisdom. We can't tell our 5-year-old it doesn't matter, or our 10-year-old. But we contain it when someone is worried, because we know when you're 10, you won't worry about that car. And when you're 15, you won't worry about that either. But we never say it to a person. We just are calm about it. We don't get anxious about it because we know we go through journeys in life. And we see that most of the time, people do come out okay. Second example was somebody who had a very big HR role in a very big bank, and she left her work because she was being bullied and she couldn't find a job. And this is a time where jobs cannot be found. So she left it 2 years ago. She thought she'd get a job quite quickly. But because she had such a high position, she was struggling to find a similar position. Now, as it was going on, now getting close to 2 years, it seemed like it was more and more impossible to find a job. So I see her once a month. She arrives also last week. These are always fresh in my mind. And she says, you won't believe it, I've got a job. I'll be running these hospitals in this whole big section. I've got 15,000 people on HR. She runs this, she's called the general manager of this HR. And how did she get this? So this is a time when people are not employing. She said, someone that I worked with 10 years ago, and she said, I thought that we ended on a bad note, called me and said, there's a job in the company that I'm working for. I had a very short interview process, and I've got the job. I'm starting on Monday. So one sees these things, and one has to put them into one's memory bank that these things are entirely possible. Why I'm mentioning it, because it's often people lose jobs, and then is at a time when it seems so unlikely it happened. Now, this is what will also help you with your worry. When anything like this happens to you, don't gloss it over, and don't just think about it for a day. Put it in your memory bank. And if you think you're going to forget, write it down. So that the next time you start worrying, you'll have a whole list. You go, remember I thought I'd never get a job, and I got a fantastic job. Remember when I thought my child would never get married, and they got married. Remember when I thought, you keep a list, and that's what gives you hope. That's what stops you worrying. You realize I worried so long, and then it just, and once that worry goes, it's an amazing thing, like pregnancy is a good example. People struggle, and I'm not minimizing the struggle. And then suddenly you're pregnant and that problem's over. And a lot of our problems are like that, because this woman, they repossess, and suddenly she's got this money in the bank. It's that quick. So you think, why did I waste all that time worrying about it? The worrying isn't what made the miracle happen. The worry isn't what changed anything. It was either the practicality, or it was definitely praying to Hashem. But worrying about it is not what have done it. And if you worry about something for 5 years, you have lost and destroyed those 5 years. I wanted to finish by just reading you something that I thought was very beautiful. It's a comment by Alicia Greenbaum about, it's called a just passing through. And again, it's in relation to yesterday's parsha. And he was saying, why are the Jews called the wandering Jews? And he says, there were 42 journeys in 40 years, which to me sounds quite a lot. But what he's saying is there were 11 in the first year, 11 moves. There were 11 in the last year. And then there were 19 in the next 38 years. And his opinion, it's not like they were moving all the time. I do think there were a lot, but I understand what he's saying. There were long periods where they stayed in one place. And he says, he thinks what stability is not how often you have to uproot yourself, but how much you feel you've got personal control over your future. And this is what he's saying. How much personal control do you have? He says the thing is, even when they stayed for a long stretch, they had no way of knowing from one day to the next how long they would stay in a certain place. So what would happen is they would be staying in a certain place, that in the morning they'd look up, and with no warning, the clouds of glory that accompanied them could suddenly rise in the sky and signify they were about to leave. So every single day they would stare up into the heavens, watching and wondering what the morrow would bring. So he says, can you imagine how impermanent they would feel? Here today, where tomorrow? And that's our lesson from the desert. There are no guarantees in life. Nothing is forever. No one ever guaranteed you or me permanent residence, and past performance is no indication of future returns. The only one constant is that wherever we travel in life, we are led by God. He's directing our footsteps. Where I go is God's say-so. How long I stay here depends entirely on Him. The choice left to me is how I utilize the time that I've been allotted, and what inspiration and memories I leave behind me when I'm gone. Life is truly a journey, and it's my responsibility to make sure that my efforts help others enjoy the trip. So I thought that was amazing, because we live in a time of such uncertainty. There are no guarantees. I can't promise you anything. And what happened in the past is no guarantee of the future. But what we have to know is that we are in God's care. And what we have to ask ourselves is, how are we going to utilize the time? How do we utilize today? And what he's saying is, how do we make sure that the others around us also enjoy the trip? I like what he also says is, what memories do we leave behind? So I'm going to end with a lovely tool that Russ Harris uses. If I were to say to you, in 2030, if I was sitting face to face with you, and I would say, how would you have liked to have acted in 2020 during the pandemic? How would you like to see yourself as acting during the 2020 pandemic? Then that's how you choose to act now. You don't want to arrive at 2030 and go, oh, I didn't maximize my time. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. Think ahead. If you look back, what memories do you want to leave behind of this time? What growth do you want to use in this time? How can you maximize all the opportunities that this pandemic is giving us for spiritual growth? What we are going through, unfortunately, terrible, terrible things, is Adam number 2. Suffering, defeat, but through that we join with Hashem. Through that we find comfort and growth. So I wish everybody well during this time, and please stay in touch, and please, God will be together in a month's time.